Josh Allen is the safest bet to finish as the QB1 because the quarterbacks who put up his passing production is a very short list. Mahomes, Herbert, Brady, let's say, they don't match his rushing numbers. And then the quarterbacks who match his rushing numbers or even exceed him, the Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray's, Lamar Jackson's, they don't put up the passing numbers that a Josh Allen does. So you kind of get the best of both worlds with Josh Allen. That's why he's my unquestioned QB1 this year. But the biggest concern I have for him is we've heard some chatter coming out of Buffalo about him being more selective when he runs. They say they're never going to take away his ability to run and just tell him, like, we want you to purely be a pocket passer. But if they tell him to get more selective and maybe they have a few less design runs, that could hurt him and open up the path for someone else taking that QB1.
I'm gonna stake my flag here and say that he will be the QB1 for the third straight year. I'm gonna plant the flag and say that it happens for the reasons that you talked about, though, right? Because the quarterbacks who run, the guys you listed, they don't necessarily have, I think, the pass catching weapons around him that Josh Allen does. The guys who match up to him as a pocket passer, say a Patrick Mahomes, Mahomes isn't going to run the same way that Josh Allen is. And even if he runs a little bit less, I still imagine he's going to be the guy near the goal line. When they get around the 3-yard line, and they have him in that shotgun or that pistol, I think he's the guy who more often than not is going to take it in. So as long as he still has that rushing touchdown upside, I think he's got the chance to be the QB1.
I know we're going to talk about their running backs a little bit more, but the fact that they brought in James Cook and Duke Johnson, like, those are pass-catching specialists. They did not bring in, like, a guy who they're like, all right, we don't want Josh Allen to run it in near the goal line. Like, it's either going to be Devin Singletary or Josh Allen, I think, getting those goal line carries.
Well, speaking of Devin Singletary, obviously was great at the end of last season. Some of that had to do with Zach Moss kind of becoming persona non grata in the offense. You take whatever you got to work with. You mentioned James Cook is there. You mentioned Duke Johnson is now there. Can Singletary pick up where he left off last year?
I easily think he can. He is my highest ranked Bills running back. But with that being said, like, he's outside my top 24 because I do have concerns, one, over how much they're going to run. This has just been a team that's been very pass happy in recent years. But I also think drafting James Cook, signing Duke Johnson, and before that, they were trying to get J.D. McKissick. So to me, that tells me that they want to get the running back more involved in the passing game. And what I think we could see is instead of them, saying we need more balance, let's run the ball more, they could just be like, hey, we need more balance, let's dump the ball off 5 times a game to a James Cook. And that's an extension of the run game that actually helps Josh Allen.
That helps Josh Allen, definitely. I worry, though, that does take away from Singletary a little bit. I think he's sort of last year he had a career-high 40 catches. It's not a huge number, I get it, but it was more than he's ever had. I don't think he gets to that number this year because Cook is there, because they can use Duke Johnson there. And if they decide, that they're not going to run as much with the quarterback and they just let him throw short passes, I do worry that Singletary goes back to being, the guy who needs 3 forms of ID to get into the end zone again. So I like him. I've always been a Devin Singletary fan. I just worry that he's not going to get the sort of touches that we need him to get to be as successful as he was last year. All right, so now the question I got, and we'll do this for all 4 teams today. We'll do this for all 32 teams. But who is the first player drafted from this team? Who's a sleeper you like from this team? And maybe who's a guy that you are avoiding from this team?
Stephon Diggs, I think, should unquestionably be the first player drafted. Last year was a down year for Stephon Diggs, and he was a top 7 fantasy wide receiver. But why I'm very optimistic about him is he led the league in end zone targets by far. Like, it was the most any player had since DeAndre Hopkins in 2017. So we're going 5-6 years back now at this point. But his catch rate was the lowest, and just in general, was the lowest it's been since his rookie season. So I'm like, all right, if the volume stays the same, and I don't see why it wouldn't, and then he just starts catching the ball more because the year before that his catch rate was like 15% higher. I just think last year was an anomaly. I think that he can have a career year potentially. For the sleeper, he's not so much a sleeper anymore. He's getting a lot of hype, but I think Isaiah McKenzie is a really good sleeper there because every report says that he is the leading slot guy right now, and we know that Josh Allen likes to target the slot receivers. Cole Beasley would get over 100 targets every year in that role, and McKenzie's way more explosive. And then player to avoid, I'm avoiding Dawson Knox in a lot of my drafts because Dawson Knox last year finished with less than 600 yards, but he had double-digit touchdowns, I believe. When you're that touchdown dependent, it seems like a recipe for disaster, especially since I think Gabriel Davis, the Bills' new number 2 wide receiver, is a better red zone threat than anyone they had in that role last year.
All right. Well, I'm with you. Stephon Diggs, easily the first guy off the board for this team. I don't think there's any question about that. He's probably going to be a first-round pick in a lot of leagues, so he's going to be going first. Sleeper is kind of hard to pick for me. I guess James Cook, he's getting a lot of buzz. Like I think it's hard to peg a sleeper because everybody's talking about this Bills offense. But I do think because of what he potentially offers and the fact that he can be a guy who can catch the football a lot, and we know how valuable those targets are, I think he has some kind of sleeper potential as a guy you get later in drafts. So my guy to avoid, and this is not necessarily about avoiding him, but sort of avoiding at cost, is kind of Gabe Davis. And I think because the hype train on him has been rolling for a while now, I think it's kind of gotten a little bit out of control. I think he has a good year. I don't think we can, read into a 3-touchdown game in the playoffs and try to extrapolate that over a full season. I also look he's coming off the board around where Allen Robinson is, and I've been on record all year saying Allen Robinson's going way too low.
I think so too.
So I like Gabe Davis. I just don't like him where I have to draft him.
I want to draft more Gabe Davis, but every time he's his ADP's there, I'm like, no, there's other players. I'd rather I take Allen Robinson every time over him.
No, absolutely. So there it is. Those are the Buffalo Bills. We'll take a quick break. We will come back and we will get you the rest of our AFC East preview on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. All right, continuing our AFC East preview, and we got the New England Patriots up next. They were 10-7, made the playoffs in 2021. We've got Sam here watching the show right now, and he's a Patriots fan. He warned us that we couldn't say anything bad about the Patriots. I don't know what he's actually going to do to us if we say something bad about the Patriots, but he threw out some blanket statement that we can't say anything bad.
The Bills did something bad to them in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, that's true. That was pretty ugly. That's what happens. That's what happens when Mac Jones, I guess, has to throw more than 3 passes in a game. I don't know. Anyway, like I said, the Patriots, 10-7, made the playoffs. Their leaders, Mac Jones, the passing leader, 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He was the QB, not the QB1. He was QB 18, I believe, is what he was this past year. Rushing, Damian Harris, 929 yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, the RB14. Jacoby Myers, your receiving leader, 866 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, including his first career receiving touchdown this year. It finally happened. Congratulations. He was a wide receiver 29. So, when we look at this team, there's been a lot of talk of Mac Jones. There's been videos of him bulked up. He's BSOHL, best shape of his life. He's apparently, looking better, looking smarter in practice, despite the fact that they've got a defensive guy calling the plays now in New England.
Yeah.
So hype train or smoke screen? Mac Jones is going to make the leap in year 2.
Yeah, I think this is a smokescreen. I think maybe I don't know. Mac Jones is the hardest player for me to get excited for because I'm like, if everything goes right and he has a great year, he's going to be, the QB 16 in fantasy football?
Right.
It's just the way the Patriots offense was built when they had a legit good offensive play caller. Now, like you said, they have a defensive guy trying to do it for the first time. This feels a lot to me, Bill Belichick is I want to prove that I can do this without anyone, and I don't think it's going to work out.
I think that's exactly what this is, the whole Matt Patricia thing. It's Belichick trying to, again, prove to everybody that he's smarter than the whole world. I don't know, maybe his ego was bruised watching Tom Brady go to Tampa, win a Super Bowl, be really competitive. So now Belichick has to prove that he can bounce back and do that too. Yeah, I think Mac Jones, of all the quarterbacks who were drafted last year, I think he's the one who's sort of closest to his ceiling.
I agree.
And I think, as the kids say, he's mid. I think that's sort of it, right? I think he's just mid. And, I don't think it's terrible, right? I think, you're not going to win a Super Bowl because of him, right? He's not going to sink the ship. I think that's sort of the best thing you can say about Mac Jones.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that he doesn't have a ton around him in terms of pass catchers. I mean, 2 years ago, this was easily the worst receiving core in the league. They've improved slightly over the last couple years, but it's still not great. And so I think it's fun to talk about Mac Jones being all bulked up because before, when he was drafted, he looked like an insurance salesman, and now he looks, like a guy who does CrossFit on weekends. So I guess that's an upgrade. But I think in terms of fantasy, I just don't see a major leap.
Yeah, he doesn't run, and they're still paying for the sins of overpaying every free agent that they paid last year because they got they traded for Devontae Parker, and that's it. That was the only offensive upgrade. Where, like you said, every other young quarterback, their teams are trying to surround them with playmakers. Except
the Bears, they're not helping Justin Fields at all.
That one.
Sorry, Hytham. You mentioned Devontae Parker coming in from Miami to New England. He's another guy who the drumbeat has kind of been slowly building for him across fantasy Twitter. And I know that, take that with a grain of salt because over the course of the summer, every player gets some sort of drumbeat from fantasy Twitter. But Devontae Parker's starting to get some love. Is this a real thing that we should really buy into, or are we just trying to make fetch happen in New England?
I think we're trying to make fetch happen, and it's never gonna happen. We know that, but I see the hype in the sense of like he could be their best downfield threat, he could be their best red zone threat. But to me, what it feels like. You're going to draft Devontae Parker late in your draft as your bench guy. Week 1's going to happen. You're going to be like, who do I drop to pick up the big waiver claim? I'm going to drop Devontae Parker. So, that to me, he seems to got like a guy that'll bounce around the waiver wire a lot.
It feels like drafting Devontae Parker, or really any Patriots wide receiver, they're going to be those guys who are, maybe even if you don't drop them, they're going to be those guys who they're not going to give you enough weekly that you feel great about starting them. But they'll give you just enough that you're scared to drop them and put them on the waiver wire.
I tweeted the other day, I was like, it costs nothing more than like a bench pick to get literally any of their receivers or like any piece of this passing offense, the tight ends, any of them, you could get as a reserve player, and I have no interest in doing that.
Yeah, there's not a lot there to get excited about in this offense. And so I appreciate the folks who are trying to make Devontae Parker, build him up. But I just don't see it happening. Even besides that, he had the one really nice year in Miami that we waited years for to happen. Outside of that, I don't think he's ever had 800 yards in a season. I don't think he's had more than 63 catches in a season besides that one year. He's never had more than 4 touchdowns. Everything about him has just been mediocre.
Yeah, we're really going off of that. And it wasn't even like a full year. It was like a 10-game stretch or something like that. Like, we're going off of that and his draft profile, which at this point, it's like they're not the same. He's not the same guy he was 7 years ago.
Right.
What are we doing?
None of us are at this point. So, all right, so then let's get to it. First player drafted, a sleeper, and a player to avoid in New England.
This is how gross it is in New England. I think the first player drafted should be Damian Harris, and he's an RB3.
Yeah.
Like, he goes in like the 7th or 8th round sometimes. So I think him and then a sleeper would be the other player that I'm interested in this offense, which is Ramondre Stevenson. Mm-hmm. Both of them go kind of similar in drafts. I think Damian Harris will be the RB1. But I think if he either fumbles, that's a terrible case there, or gets hurt, misses time for anything like that, Ramondre Stevenson, I think, has an even higher ceiling because he can actually catch passes, whereas Damian Harris struggles with that. And player to avoid, the entire passing offense. Like, I don't want any of their receivers, Mac Jones. If I had to say one, I guess it would be like Jacoby Myers because like he's going to be the slot guy in between the 20s and not get a whole lot of usage in the red zone, but I really don't want any of their receivers.
So our lists are absolutely identical. Damian Harris is my first player off the board. Ramondre Stevenson is my sleeper, and he's the guy that I've been kind of having as a sleeper pretty much all throughout the offseason there. I just like what his potential can be. And, yeah, I probably would have said the whole Patriots passing game. I singled out Jacoby Myers. Sorry, Jacoby. But, I mean, just the fact that, the 2 touchdowns, maybe he gets more, but I don't think it's significantly more. I just don't see this being an offense that puts up a lot of points this year, and that's going to impact everybody. I also, by the way, was shocked to be reminded that Damian Harris ran for 15 touchdowns last year. I somehow didn't remember that.
that's going to be hard to duplicate.
It's going to be hard to duplicate. I just don't see this being a high-powered offense, and that's going to make it hard to really count on anybody there for fantasy. So, all right, so we go from New England down to Miami. The Dolphins last year were 9-8, just missed the playoffs. Tua Tagovailoa, your passing leader, 2,653 yards, 16 touchdowns, 10 picks. That made him the QB 24. Myles Gaskin, your rushing leader, 612 yards with 3 rushing touchdowns, RB 24. Fun fact, I went back and looked. I was like, when is the last time the Dolphins had like a decent running game? The last time they had somebody run for more than 1,000 yards was 2016, Jay Ajayi.
Yikes.
Like 1,200 yards. He had 1,200 yards, I think, in a season.
I tried to remember who the running backs were in recent years, and the only name outside of before the Ryan Fitzpatrick year that I could remember was Arian Foster.
Yeah, but because that was like the end of his career basically. But Jay Ajayi, the last Dolphins runner to get more than 1,000 yards. That was 2016. It's been a minute. In fact, I think he was the only one in that stretch to get even more than like 800 yards. I think everybody else was like under 800 yards.
That Fitzpatrick year, he led them with like 230 rushing yards.
That was disgusting. I think that was also the year I think I rostered Patrick Laird because I was really hurting for a running back at the end of the season. Spoiler alert, I did not make the playoffs. Your receiving leader in Miami last year, Jalen Waddle, 104 catches, 1,015 yards, six receiving touchdowns, wide receiver 13. All right. Everything around this offense, I feel like, starts and ends with Tua Tagovailoa. Tyreek Hill having interviews where he's saying Tua is great, comparing him to Patrick Mahomes, and the rest of fantasy Twitter is saying like boo, boo, tomato, 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 but really trying to pump up his guy. The Dolphins sending out Twitter videos of Tua throwing deep passes down the field, like trying to convince us that things are turning around. So, can Tua be a QB1 this year?
Easily. Like I'm in on Tua Tagovailoa. He is one of my guys this year. The narrative that he can't throw a deep ball is so ridiculous to me. First of all, he was top 4 in completion percentage of passes of 20-plus air yards last year, and in yards per attempt in those passes as well, which are 2 of the stats that really determine if you are a good long ball thrower or not. To me, the narrative comes from the fact that I believe in his NFL career, it's less than 50 downfield pass attempts. Like it was just a product of the offense, and we saw that last year. Like Jalen Waddle, he was getting used like it's like you say. You always saw the line of scrimmage and like the yard marker on the screen when he was catching balls. Like that's how the offense was designed. My philosophy is always like don't assume a player can't do something if he's never been asked to do it. And Tua never has been asked to do it. And in college, he was one of the best deep ball throwers as well. So with all of this talent around him, I think Tua is going to have a big year, and he is my favorite backup quarterback that I like to draft in fantasy.
The thing I keep coming back to is the way America was introduced to Tua Tagovailoa. Him throwing a deep ball to Devontae Smith to win a national championship, coming in the second half of that game after Jalen Hurts was benched, and Tua just slinging a deep ball down the field, and the Crimson Tide win a national title on that. So he can throw the deep ball. He hasn't so far in Miami. Now he's got plenty of options, right? He's got Tyreek Hill. He's got Jalen Waddle. He has the personnel to go and stretch the field this year. And this is the thing he did in college regularly. He just hasn't. I have been a Tua backer this whole time. I will say his ceiling is probably a fringe QB1. I think more likely you're probably safer drafting him, as you mentioned, as a backup quarterback. But if he puts it together, I think he can knock on the door of being a QB1 this year. I know Dolphin fans are sort of hoping for it. Our guy Troy King, I know is begging for Tua to be a QB1. I think there's a road where that can happen, but I think I'd still feel safer drafting him as a second quarterback. The other part of this team that's very confusing right now is the running back situation. They hire Mike McDaniel as their head coach. They bring in Raheem Mostert. They've got Chase Edmonds. They still have Myles Gaskin. I think as of this moment, I think Savon Ahmed might still be there. There's a lot of guys in that backfield. How are you approaching this in drafts?
So for the most part, like I'm not going into any drafts being like, I need this Dolphins running back. A lot of it, though, is Chase Edmonds is going outside the top 30 running backs in a lot of drafts. He's going as an RB3 that you can get in like the 8th, 9th round, something like that, sometimes even later. And for me, I think he's worth taking a shot on because he's going to be the pass catcher there, I believe. And of all the running backs they brought in, you can add up all the other guys' salaries combined, and it doesn't equal what they gave Chase Edmonds. So I think that's telling that and he was the first one they brought in. So Edmonds as like an RB3, I think has a lot of upside there. And then as like a late round dart throw, give me Raheem Mostert. Like this is a guy who we know he is very explosive. We know the speed and the burst that he possesses. And then he already knows this system with Mike McDaniel coming over from San Francisco. I don't think he'll be the workhorse back, but I do think he'll be the back that gets like 8 to 10 touches a game, and it's just their home run hitter. So as like a very late round pick, I think that's worth investing. Especially, this is everyone's favorite saying this time of year, especially in best ball though.
Especially in best ball.
That guy's a home run hitter.
Which I always hate saying that because it feels like a cop out, but sometimes it really fits. Like especially in best ball,
yeah,
like, he's a home run hitter. I think you sort of nailed it though, because the good news about the Dolphins' backfield is that there's no one there that you have to invest a lot of draft capital in. You're not reaching to get Chase Edmonds or Raheem Mostert. Look, I mean, there's a very good chance that maybe a Myles Gaskin isn't even on that roster when Week 1 rolls around. We'll see how that works out. So that's at least the comforting part of this. And if McDaniel can get that running game going the way the Niners had it going, you're going to find somebody there that's fairly productive that you can use maybe as a flex player more often than not. So I think that's sort of the way to look at this. I think you're right. I don't think there's anybody that you're specifically targeting. Nobody's going into this draft saying like, I gotta get Raheem Mostert. but I do think there's potential value there if these guys can perform up to their expectation. So, first player, sleeper, player to avoid.
So my first player drafted, I think is kind of obvious. I think it's Tyreek Hill. Even though I'm not targeting Tyreek Hill in my drafts, I still have him ranked the highest of all the Dolphins receivers. I still think he's like a borderline wide receiver 1. My concern with him, though, is just volume in this passing attack. So that's why I'm not really targeting him. The sleeper, it's the 2 players that I've already, Chase Edmonds, and my biggest sleeper is Tua. I think Tua can have a great breakout year. This is the spicy one, though, Marcus.
Okay.
Player to avoid, I am not touching Jalen Waddle this year. Ooh. Like, Jalen Waddle last year was awesome. I had him as a wide receiver 1 before they made the Tyreek Hill trade. But Jalen Waddle was so awesome in part because he was getting a ton of volume. And he broke the rookie record for receptions. I don't know if he's going to be able to duplicate the volume he had last year because they paid Tyreek Hill a lot of money. They gave up a lot of assets to get him. They're going to he's going to be the top target there. Mike Gesicki might still have a role. Like, there's just a lot of, who knows how much they're going to run the ball. There's a lot of question marks with this team. And people are still taking both of the receivers like top 15 guys. To me, I'm like, you guys could have the receivers. I'll get all the production baked in on Tua, and I'll just be happy with it.
I think people see the talent between Hill and Waddle, and I think that's where they're drafting them, and not necessarily thinking about the fact that, you're right, the passing volume, this isn't like Kansas City, right, where you knew Patrick Mahomes could sustain multiple receivers, multiple pass catchers. We're not sure, as much as we may be optimistic about Tua, we're not sure that can happen just yet. So I totally get that. Tyreek Hill, for me, is obviously the first guy off the board. I mean, he's going to be is he still a first-round pick, or is he a second-round guy now?
I wouldn't take him in the first round. I don't see him go often in the first.
I don't think so either. I think he's kind of more of a second-round guy this year. My sleeper, you mentioned it, is Raheem Mostert. Just because, again, you're getting him really, really late. He's got home run potential, and his issue in his career has just been staying healthy.
Yeah.
If he can stay healthy and stay on the field, I think he has the potential to really be a difference maker. And again, you're not investing a lot in draft capital to get Raheem Mostert. So if he can stay healthy, that upside is obviously there for him. My player to avoid is Mike Gesicki. And Gesicki to me has sort of become, he's kind of that poster child for like the middle of the road kind of meh tight ends. And like, I always say, like, avoid Mike Gesicki, and I always know I get to a draft, and I'm in, like, the 10th round, and, like, the clock's running out, and I panic. I'm like, Mike Gesicki, and then I hate myself for it for weeks after. But the reason I would try to avoid him, it's not because I think he's bad or going to be bad, but I think we've sort of seen what he can be, and that was in years without Tyreek Hill taking away those targets. Now we just know that he's sort of a middle-of-the-road tight end, and I think if I'm missing out on the top-end tight ends, I don't know that I want a Mike Gesicki to fill that spot. I would much rather wait and go after like an Albert O, an Irv Smith, one of those guys a little bit later that I think has big upside, that I think can maybe hit a bit of a higher ceiling than just kind of watching, Mike Gesicki sort of be oatmeal.
I think I think it's in the range of outcomes for Gesicki where like he's not even fantasy relevant, because I could see. He always operated out of the slot. Their top 2 receivers operate out of the slot. Are they going to use the tight end to block in this system, which the 49ers did a lot? He's not the blocking tight end.
Right.
Like, he could just be like a third down type of tight end, and that would not have any fantasy relevance.
That would be no bueno. So I think I'm away from Mike Gesicki just because I think there are other guys that offer more upside than he does at this point in his career. All right, so that gets us to our final team in the AFC East. That is the New York Jets, 4-13 in 2021. Zach Wilson was your passing leader, 2,334 yards, 9 touchdowns, 11 picks. He was the QB 29. Michael Carter, your rushing leader, 639 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, RB 28. And Elijah Moore, your receiving leader. 43 catches, 538 yards, 5 receiving touchdowns, wide receiver 48. So it was a youth movement, without a doubt, in New York last year. And they're still adding pieces. They went out, they drafted Breece Hall, they drafted Garrett Wilson, which, by the way, I don't know, I'm sure somebody in research can find this out for us. When is the last time a team had 3 rookie category leaders, passing, rushing, and receiving? Because that's what happened with the Jets last year with Wilson, Carter, and Moore. I would think at some point it's probably happened, but I don't know when. And that's a thing that it would be kind of interesting to take a look at. So I mentioned Breece Hall is coming in. He is a fantasy Twitter darling right now, but that does make Michael Carter kind of a second fiddle there in New York. What are we doing with him in drafts this year?
I think we should be drafting him. Like, Michael Carter is someone that I feel pretty good about because he's going late in drafts. Like, he's not even a top 40 running back off the board. And then every Jet reporter right now is saying he is still going to have a role. Like, it could be like a 60-40 split. And I've been seeing a lot of hype about Michael Carter coming out of Jets camp. And I think he gets over, like, everyone loves Javonte Williams, right? Michael Carter on a per-touch basis was, like, just as good at, like, forcing missed tackles and stuff as Javonte Williams. He might not have the same explosiveness, but he's not far behind. And if anything was to happen to Breece Hall, I think Michael Carter's upside is at being an RB1 if he's, like, dominating touches in that backfield. So if you either take like a 0 RB approach, or maybe you get like your starting RBs early and then you start loading up on other positions, I think Michael Carter is a great like bench running back to have on your fantasy team.
So then are we overdrafting Breece Hall?
See, I don't think we are, because he's going like RB like 19, something like that, and I think he has RB1 potential as well because he is just amazingly good.
I do like Michael Carter. I was a little bit frustrated when they drafted Breece Hall because I wanted to see what he could do with a slightly larger role, but that's not going to happen now. And I think, I do think it's going to be a 60-40 split probably there. So I do like Carter. We just have to figure out what the role is going to be. And so much of this is how much does Zach Wilson get better this year? If Zach Wilson doesn't get much better, then I don't know that none of this matters a whole lot if the offense doesn't move the football. But it does bring me to the question of the wide receivers. Elijah Moore was a guy that everybody liked last year and flashed at times. They bring in Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. Between the two of them, who you got this year?
So I have Elijah Moore ranked higher, but the one that I will more likely to draft is Garrett Wilson because there's like a 5-round gap between where these players are going, and that just seems entirely too high to me. I understand Elijah Moore played really well. He had like a 6-7 week stretch where he was a wide receiver 1, and we always everyone liked him coming into last year, like you said, so we tend to be like, look, we thought this guy was great, he's the unquestioned wide receiver 1 here. It's like, well, they knew how good he was, and they still use a top 10 pick to get another guy in Garrett Wilson, who I think is going to get a lot of volume right away. So if you're going to give me a huge discount, I'm going to take the guy that's just going way later because I think they'll be pretty close at the end of the year.
I think that's the argument for Wilson, right? Is that like, and we see this every year in fantasy. Like you have two guys who you think their production is going to be similar, but one has a way lower ADP. That's always the guy I'm going to draft in that situation. If I think the numbers are going to be close, I'm going to take the guy that I can wait a handful of rounds on. And right now, that very much is Garrett Wilson in this one. And I'm a guy who liked Elijah Moore.
Same.
But I think Garrett Wilson's sort of the guy. But I go back to, if Zach Wilson doesn't get much better, then it doesn't really matter at all.
Nope.
All right, so let's finish this out then. First player drafted, sleeper, and player to avoid.
First player drafted is Breece Hall. He's going in like the 4th round, and I think that's really appropriate for him. I love that you get him as an RB2, but I think his upside is being an RB1. Sleeper, this might sound dirty to some. Give me Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson, like I spent in the offseason some time watching Zach Wilson play last year, and my takeaway was like there's nothing on a football field this kid can't do. Like every single throw, he has all the arm talent in the world. It's just he made a lot of really bad decisions. Will that get fixed? I don't know, but you got to draft him outside the top 20 quarterbacks to find out. So I love if like I have a proven quarterback 1, like a Josh Allen, Mahomes, any of those guys, I'll take Zach Wilson as my quarterback 2 because I think the upside is that high that if he hits, people are going to want Zach Wilson. I'll have a trade asset or something like that. Player to avoid is really hard because none of the Jets are priced high at all. I like Moore and Wilson and both running backs and Zach Wilson. So I guess Corey Davis, the tight ends, like I won't take any of those guys. But I think the rest of the Jets are appropriately priced and worth drafting.
All right. Well, my first player off the board, no surprise, it's going to be Breece Hall. I think he's the guy everybody loves. He's the new shiny thing in the offense. I think he gets plenty of touches, so he's the guy who goes first. For me, my sleeper, and this is maybe a deeper one, but I think Braxton Berrios is just going to be a guy who just kind of hangs around, right? He's that nice security blanket, can get open in the middle of the field whenever they need somebody to make some plays. And I think part of getting Zach Wilson to make better, smarter decisions is giving him some easy targets, and I think that's what Berrios can be. So if you see him sort of take that step forward, that's the reason. But me saying that, I'm still avoiding Zach Wilson in drafts. I'm just saying all that. Just because there's still so much more I want to see him do. There's so much improvement I want to see from him. That right now, and because he is going so late, it's like I can just easily pivot to a different direction that late in the draft and not really feel like I'm missing out on anything. Maybe he makes the leap, and maybe he looks great. In the case I look silly, but I'll take that chance.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I'll take Zach Wilson over Mac Jones. Ooh. And I think it's realistically possible the Patriots could finish in last place this year.
I think when you look at just athletic profile and stuff, I don't think that's crazy.
Because Zach Wilson can run, he's got a cannon of it. Like the floor is much, much safer with Mac Jones. But when I'm taking a quarterback too, I want upside. Right. So I'm gonna go with the guy that I think has a lot of upside. Whereas I know the floor is, he could just be awful and but I'll just drop him and pick up I don't know, whoever's the quarterback on the waiver wire, Matt Ryan, someone like that.